The courtroom doors swung open on a cold Tuesday morning, and every person sitting inside could already feel the tension hanging in the air like thick smoke trapped beneath the ceiling lights. The entire courtroom looked ordinary at first glance, but beneath that silence, two completely different lives were about to collide in a way nobody would ever forget. At the center of the room sat Karen Davis, a woman who had spent years learning how to manipulate people with carefully rehearsed emotions, fake tears, and dramatic breakdowns whenever life stopped going her way. She wore a soft gray blouse and black slacks designed to make her appear fragile and harmless, and on her wrist rested a shiny medical bracelet she had bought only days earlier after studying online videos about anxiety disorders and panic attacks. Across from her sat Robert James, a tired 67-year-old retired schoolteacher whose hands trembled slightly as he clutched a thick folder packed with receipts, photographs, repair estimates, and unpaid bills that represented months of emotional exhaustion. The tension between them felt like two highways racing directly toward each other before a catastrophic collision, and nobody in that room yet understood how destructive the impact would become. Behind the bench, Judge Judy entered with her usual sharp expression, her black robe flowing behind her like a storm cloud moving across the sky, and the moment she sat down, the atmosphere changed completely. She had already reviewed Karen's history before the hearing even began, and what she discovered had painted a disturbing picture of a woman who had turned manipulation into an art form. Karen believed this would simply be another easy performance, another courtroom she could emotionally control using fake distress and carefully timed medical emergencies. But Judge Judy had seen too many liars during her 28 years on the bench to fall for cheap theatrics. Cameras silently adjusted their angles as the audience settled into complete silence, waiting for the hearing to begin. Judge Judy glanced down at the case file before lifting her eyes directly toward Karen. "Miss Davis," she began calmly, "you're suing your former landlord, Mr. James, for $3,500 in emotional distress connected to your eviction. Explain to me exactly what happened." Karen instantly shifted into performance mode, lowering her voice until it sounded shaky and emotional. "Your Honor, living under Mr. James was a nightmare. He constantly harassed me, pressured me, and made me feel unsafe in my own home. I developed severe anxiety because of his behavior. I can barely sleep anymore. I've suffered panic attacks, emotional breakdowns, and ongoing trauma ever since the eviction happened." She paused dramatically, placing her hand against her chest as if speaking about the situation physically hurt her. "I've even had to attend therapy because of what he put me through." Judge Judy stared at her without blinking. "You attended therapy?" Karen nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor, for several months." "Do you have any receipts or records showing therapy payments?" Karen's confident expression cracked for only a split second before she forced another weak smile. I don't have them with me today, but I can provide them later." Judge Judy leaned slightly back in her chair. "You filed a lawsuit asking for therapy compensation, but came to court without proof of therapy?" Karen swallowed hard. "I wasn't expecting—" "You weren't expecting evidence to matter in court," Judge Judy interrupted sharply. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the audience. Karen quickly tried to recover. "No, Your Honor, I just mean I've been overwhelmed emotionally." Judge Judy made a short note on her legal pad, and something about that small movement instantly made Karen uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Robert James sat quietly, waiting for his chance to speak, his exhausted eyes filled with years of stress compressed into months. When Judge Judy finally turned toward him, his voice came out softer than expected. "Your Honor, I rented my property to Miss Davis, believing she would treat it respectfully. I've been a landlord for 15 years and never experienced anything remotely like this. He slowly opened the thick folder in his lap. The property was destroyed piece by piece during the 8 months she lived there. One by one, he handed photographs toward the bench. Pictures showed dark paint covering walls that had originally been clean neutral colors, broken bathroom tiles scattered across the floor, scratched hardwood flooring ruined by pets, and deep stains covering carpets throughout the house. Robert's voice shook harder with every sentence. I tried to speak respectfully with her multiple times, but every conversation turned into threats. When I asked her to stop damaging the property, she told me she'd make my life miserable if I kept bothering her. Judge Judy carefully examined every photograph while the courtroom grew quieter and quieter. How much damage are we talking about financially? She asked. Robert handed over repair estimates and receipts. $4,800 in repairs, Your Honor. And she also refused to pay the final month's rent before the eviction. Karen suddenly interrupted from her chair. Those damages are exaggerated. Judge Judy instantly turned toward her. You'll speak when I ask you to speak. Karen immediately lowered her eyes. Robert continued carefully. The security deposit barely covered a fraction of the repairs. I'm retired, Your Honor. That property supplements my pension income. This entire situation drained my savings and caused me months of stress. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses before looking directly at Karen again. Miss Davis, these photographs show severe property damage. You're claiming emotional distress, but it appears Mr. James experienced substantial financial distress because of your actions. Karen immediately switched back into emotional victim mode. Your Honor, the stress I experienced living there affected my mental health terribly. I was constantly anxious because Mr. James kept pressuring me about every tiny thing. Judge Judy folded her arms. You mentioned panic attacks earlier? Karen nodded dramatically. Yes, severe panic attacks. How long have you suffered from panic disorder? Judge Judy asked casually. Karen answered immediately, clearly believing she was controlling the conversation again. Only since the eviction happened around 6 months ago. Before that, I was completely healthy. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly. So before 6 months ago, you never experienced panic attacks? Never, Karen replied firmly. Mr. James caused all of this. Judge Judy remained silent for several seconds, and the silence itself began making Karen visibly nervous. Finally, the judge reached toward another folder resting beside her bench, one Karen had not noticed earlier. That's very interesting, Miss Davis, Judge Judy said slowly, because the documents sitting in front of me tell a completely different story. Karen's face instantly tightened. The room became so silent that even the camera operators stopped moving. Judge Judy opened the folder carefully. According to court records, you've appeared in multiple lawsuits over the last 3 years involving sudden medical emergencies during hearings. Karen froze. Robert James looked confused. The audience leaned forward. Judge Judy continued calmly. March 2021. You experienced severe heart palpitations during a small claims case. Paramedics responded and found no medical issues. August 2022. You claimed respiratory distress during traffic court proceedings. Again, medical staff found nothing wrong. February 2023. You suffered what you described as a life-threatening anxiety attack during civil court. Karen's face had now completely lost color. Judge Judy kept going. Once again, no medical emergency existed. Karen shifted nervously in her chair. Those situations were different. Judge Judy ignored the interruption completely. What interests me most, Miss Davis, is how these medical emergencies always appear at the exact moment your cases begin falling apart. The audience began murmuring quietly. Karen suddenly realized the situation was no longer under her control. For the first time since entering the courtroom, genuine fear appeared in her eyes. But instead of backing down, Karen made the worst decision possible. She suddenly grabbed her chest dramatically, inhaling sharply before reaching into her designer handbag with trembling hands. From inside, she pulled out a folded brown paper bag she had prepared specifically for this exact moment. I can't breathe, she gasped loudly. Her breathing instantly became exaggerated and rapid as she pressed the paper bag against her mouth. Your Honor, I'm having a panic attack right now. Several audience members gasped while Robert James stared in disbelief. Karen's body shook theatrically as she leaned sideways in her chair. My chest hurts. I feel dizzy. I think my heart is racing. The bailiff instinctively stepped forward, uncertain how serious the situation actually was. Karen continued, breathing loudly into the bag, while occasionally peeking through her fingers to check Judge Judy's reaction. But Judge Judy didn't react at all. She remained perfectly still behind the bench, arms crossed, face completely expressionless. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Karen's dramatic breathing became louder and louder, but Judge Judy still didn't move a single muscle. The entire courtroom slowly realized something unusual was happening. Judge Judy was refusing to reward the performance. Karen's panic grew stronger because the reaction she expected wasn't happening. Please, she whimpered weakly. I need medical attention. Finally, Judge Judy spoke, her voice completely calm. Miss Davis, are you finished performing? The sentence hit the room like an explosion. Karen froze for half a second before continuing her fake hyperventilation even more dramatically. This is real, she gasped. I can't breathe properly. Judge Judy calmly reached toward the phone sitting beside her bench. The audience immediately straightened in shock because she almost never used that phone during hearings. She pressed a button without taking her eyes off Karen. Bailiff, she said evenly. Call paramedics immediately. Miss Davis claims she's experiencing a serious medical emergency, and we're going to take that very seriously. Karen's breathing instantly slowed slightly. Judge Judy continued coldly. And while you're at it, have a police officer come upstairs as well. I'd like an official witness present. Karen's eyes widened with genuine panic now, not the fake kind she had rehearsed in her bathroom mirror. Actually, she said nervously, lowering the paper bag slightly, maybe I'm calming down already. Judge Judy leaned forward. No, Miss Davis, you stated you were experiencing chest pain, breathing difficulty, dizziness, and tachycardia. Those are serious symptoms. We will wait for professional medical evaluation. Karen's hands visibly shook now for a completely different reason. She had walked directly into a trap she never expected Judge Judy to set. The entire courtroom remained frozen in complete silence as Karen Davis sat gripping the brown paper bag with trembling hands, desperately trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped away from her faster than she could process. Only minutes earlier, she had believed this performance would save her once again, just like it supposedly had inside other courtrooms over the past several years. But now the reality crashing down around her felt terrifyingly different. Judge Judy wasn't reacting with sympathy, concern, or hesitation. She wasn't postponing the case. She wasn't reducing penalties. She wasn't treating Karen like a fragile victim. Instead, she was calmly waiting for medical professionals to expose the truth in front of cameras, court staff, and an audience that had already begun realizing something dishonest was unfolding. Karen's breathing slowed noticeably as panic shifted from fake theatrics into genuine fear, but Judge Judy noticed every tiny change instantly. Interesting, the judge said coldly, folding her arms tighter across her chest. Your symptoms appear to improve whenever accountability enters the room. Karen swallowed hard and tried forcing another weak gasp. Your Honor, panic attacks can come and go suddenly. Judge Judy didn't blink. Real panic attacks don't usually disappear the second paramedics get called. The audience reacted with quiet murmurs while Robert James sat motionless in disbelief, still clutching his folder of evidence like someone who couldn't fully believe the nightmare was finally collapsing in front of him. Karen lowered the paper bag slightly, clearly considering whether she should continue the performance or abandon it completely. But before she could decide, the courtroom doors suddenly opened. 2 paramedics entered, carrying medical equipment bags, along with a portable monitor, both wearing the calm, focused expressions of people accustomed to handling genuine emergencies every single day. The female paramedic stepped forward first. "Mom, we understand you're experiencing chest pain and breathing difficulty." Karen immediately looked toward Judge Judy before answering nervously. I think maybe it's calming down now." Judge Judy instantly interrupted. She reported severe symptoms including breathing problems, chest pain, dizziness, tachycardia, and dissociation. "I'd like a complete evaluation for the court record." Karen's eyes widened again. This wasn't turning into the quick sympathy moment she had planned. The paramedics professionally unpacked their equipment while the entire courtroom watched every movement with absolute attention. One paramedic wrapped a blood pressure cuff around Karen's arm, while the other clipped a pulse oximeter onto her finger. Karen tried forcing shaky breaths again, but now her acting looked messy and inconsistent because real panic had replaced rehearsed confidence. On a scale from 1 to 10, the female paramedic asked calmly, "How severe is your anxiety right now?" Karen hesitated too long. Maybe 7. The paramedic nodded and wrote something down. "Are you currently experiencing chest pain?" Karen glanced briefly toward Judge Judy again before answering weakly, "A little." "Describe the pain." Karen froze. "It's hard to explain." The paramedics exchanged a quick professional glance, the kind medical workers share when they already suspect someone is exaggerating symptoms. Meanwhile, Judge Judy remained perfectly silent, watching every second unfold with laser focus. The blood pressure machine beeped softly as numbers appeared on the screen. The paramedic checked the results before speaking clearly enough for the courtroom to hear. "Blood pressure is 120/78. Completely normal." Karen's shoulders visibly stiffened. The male paramedic checked her pulse next. "Heart rate is 82 beats per minute," he announced. "Normal resting range." Karen's fake breathing suddenly became quieter. The pulse oximeter continued flashing steady numbers. "Oxygen saturation 99%, the female paramedic continued calmly. "Excellent oxygen levels. No signs of respiratory distress." Every medical reading crushed Karen's performance piece by piece in front of everyone watching. There was nowhere left to hide. No emotional speech could argue against machines recording perfectly healthy, vital signs in real time. The male paramedic completed the final part of the examination before turning respectfully towards Judge Judy. "Your Honor, based on our assessment, there are no signs of a medical emergency. All vital signs are stable and completely normal. We're not observing symptoms consistent with acute panic distress or cardiovascular complications." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "So for the official court record, Miss Davis is not experiencing a medical emergency?" "Correct," the paramedic replied firmly. "There is no medical emergency present." The silence afterward felt crushing. Karen stared downward while gripping the crumpled paper bag so tightly it nearly tore apart in her hands. Every ounce of confidence she entered the courtroom with had vanished completely. Judge Judy slowly leaned forward, her eyes locked directly onto Karen. "Miss Davis," she said quietly, "your performance just failed under professional medical examination." Karen immediately tried one final defense. I really was scared. Judge Judy's expression hardened instantly. Scared because your lies were collapsing. Karen opened her mouth again, but Judge Judy raised a hand sharply. No, you've spoken enough already. She reached toward another stack of documents sitting beside her bench. Let's discuss the larger pattern here. Karen's breathing became shallow again, but now it wasn't fake. Judge Judy opened the file carefully while the audience leaned forward with growing anticipation. Over the past 3 years, she began calmly, you have repeatedly claimed sudden medical emergencies inside courtrooms immediately after evidence began turning against you. She lifted the first document, March 2021, small claims court involving an auto repair dispute. You claimed severe heart palpitations. Paramedics found no medical issues. Another page flipped. August 2022, traffic court hearing. You reported respiratory distress after receiving multiple violations. Again, no medical findings. Another page, February 2023, civil proceeding involving unpaid debt. You called for emergency medical assistance, claiming a severe panic attack. Once again, all vitals normal. Karen's face looked completely drained. Now, Judge Judy continued without mercy. June 2023, housing court. Chest pain and dizziness during cross-examination. No emergency discovered. The audience reacted louder this time, shocked by how systematic the pattern had become. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses before speaking directly toward the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly how manipulation works inside legal systems. A person learns that emotional performances create sympathy, delays, reduced penalties, or settlement pressure. Eventually, they begin treating courtrooms like stages instead of places for truth. Karen's eyes filled with tears, but even those tears no longer looked believable. Judge Judy wasn't finished yet. She pulled out printed screenshots next, and Karen visibly froze the second she recognized them. They were social media posts, her own social media posts. Judge Judy held them up one by one. The day after your so-called severe heart episode, you posted concert photos online. Another page lifted. The day after your respiratory distress incident, you checked into a gym workout. Another screenshot appeared. And after your emergency panic attack requiring ambulance evaluation, you posted beach vacation pictures smiling less than 24 hours later. Quiet laughter spread through parts of the courtroom while Karen covered part of her face in humiliation. Judge Judy's voice became colder with every sentence. You make miraculous recoveries the moment court ends. Robert James slowly shook his head, as if finally understanding the full scope of manipulation he had been dealing with. For months he had questioned whether maybe Karen truly believed her own victim stories, but now even he could see the pattern clearly. She wasn't confused. She wasn't emotionally overwhelmed. She was strategic. Judge Judy turned back toward Karen with complete authority. You filed a lawsuit demanding emotional distress compensation without therapy receipts, without medical documentation, and without evidence supporting your claims. Meanwhile, the defendant presented photographs, repair invoices, unpaid rent records, and property damage documentation. She paused briefly before delivering the sentence that completely destroyed Karen's remaining credibility. Frankly, Miss Davis, the only thing damaged here appears to be Mr. James's property and patience. The audience burst into applause before the bailiff shouted for order again. Karen sat motionless, unable to even look upward anymore. Her fake victim image had shattered beyond repair. Judge Judy then reviewed Robert's counterclaim carefully, examining every receipt, photograph, and estimate with clinical precision. Floor replacement, she read aloud, $2,100. Wall repainting and repair, $900. Tile replacement, 600, deep cleaning and odor removal. 800, unpaid rent. 1,500. She looked directly at Karen again. Do you dispute any of these documented expenses? Karen barely whispered her response. No, Your Honor. Judge Judy nodded once. I didn't think so. The room became completely silent again, because everyone understood the final ruling was approaching. Karen looked defeated now, no longer pretending to hyperventilate, no longer acting emotionally fragile, no longer trying to control the narrative. For the first time all morning, she looked exactly like what she truly was. Someone caught manipulating the system after years of believing she could outsmart everyone around her. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses and placed them carefully on the desk in front of her, while the entire courtroom sat frozen in anticipation. Every person understanding they were witnessing the complete destruction of someone who had spent years manipulating sympathy, faking vulnerability, and abusing the legal system for personal gain. Karen Davis remained motionless in her chair, clutching the crushed brown paper bag in her lap like the final broken piece of a performance that had completely collapsed in front of millions of future viewers. The confidence she entered the courtroom with earlier that morning had vanished entirely, replaced now by humiliation, fear, and the terrifying realization that her carefully rehearsed manipulation tactics no longer worked when facing someone who had already seen every trick imaginable. Judge Judy looked directly into Karen's eyes for several long seconds before finally speaking again, her voice colder and sharper than at any previous moment during the hearing. Miss Davis, I have spent nearly 3 decades listening to people lie, manipulate, exaggerate, and perform inside courtrooms. Most people eventually reveal themselves because liars always make one mistake. They begin believing they are smarter than everyone around them. You walked into this courtroom believing fake tears, fake panic, fake medical terminology, and fake victimhood would overpower evidence, facts, and common sense. Karen lowered her eyes again, unable to even maintain eye contact anymore. Judge Judy continued without slowing down. But this courtroom is not social media. It's not a stage for emotional performances. It's a place where evidence matters, and the evidence today completely destroyed your credibility. The audience remained silent, hanging on to every word, while Robert James sat almost frozen with disbelief, still processing the fact that after months of stress and financial damage, someone was finally holding Karen accountable. Judge Judy lifted Robert's photographs again, briefly reviewing the destruction left behind inside the rental property. Mr. James presented clear evidence showing extensive property damage, unpaid rent, repair invoices, and documented financial loss. Meanwhile, you presented emotional stories with zero proof, zero medical records, zero therapy documentation, and a medical emergency that professional paramedics officially determined was completely fake. Karen quietly whispered, I was overwhelmed. Judge Judy immediately cut her off. No, you were caught. The words hit the room like a hammer. Karen visibly flinched while Judge Judy leaned slightly forward. There's a major difference between genuine emotional distress and strategic emotional manipulation. Real victims don't conveniently develop panic attacks every single time evidence turns against them in court. Real medical emergencies don't disappear. The second trained professionals begin checking vital signs, and honest people don't build repeated patterns of fake courtroom breakdowns across multiple legal cases. Judge Judy then turned briefly toward Robert James, her expression softening slightly for the first time all morning. Mr. James, I'm sorry you had to experience this situation. People like Miss Davis create distrust toward legitimate emotional health issues because they weaponize sympathy for personal advantage. Robert nodded quietly, emotion filling his eyes as he struggled to respond. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Judy returned her attention toward Karen once more. Here's the biggest problem with people who manipulate systems for years. Eventually, they stop realizing how obvious the pattern becomes. Every previous courtroom rewarded your behavior with sympathy, delays, or reduced consequences. That taught you something dangerous. It taught you manipulation works, so you kept escalating it. Bigger performances, bigger emotional scenes, bigger lies. Until eventually you became arrogant enough to believe nobody would ever challenge you. Karen's face tightened again as tears rolled slowly down her cheeks. But now nobody inside the room viewed those tears as trustworthy anymore. Judge Judy slowly picked up her gavel while speaking with absolute finality. Your lawsuit against Mr. James for emotional distress is dismissed entirely. You failed to provide evidence supporting your claims, and your credibility has been destroyed beyond repair. Karen shut her eyes tightly as the ruling continued. Furthermore, after reviewing the defendant's documented counterclaim, this court awards Mr. James $4,800 for property damages, $1,500 for unpaid rent, and additional court-related expenses totaling $2,200. The audience began whispering immediately, while Karen's shoulders slumped lower and lower. Judge Judy finished the calculation clearly for the official record. Total judgment against you, $8,500. Karen's head snapped upward in shock. Earlier that morning, she entered demanding money. Now she was leaving deeply in debt instead. Judge Judy's expression remained completely unforgiving. You attempted to weaponize fake victimhood against a retired teacher who simply wanted his property respected. You wasted court time, abused medical resources, and repeatedly manipulated public systems designed to help real people with real emergencies. She paused briefly before delivering the sentence that would permanently haunt Karen long after the cameras stopped recording. This courtroom will forward today's hearing records, including the official paramedic evaluation, to other courts within this jurisdiction. The next time you suddenly develop a convenient medical emergency while losing a case, judges will already know exactly who you are. Karen looked completely shattered now. The fake confidence, fake vulnerability, and fake panic had all disappeared, leaving behind only embarrassment and the crushing reality of exposure. Judge Judy lifted the gavel one final time. You wanted attention, Miss Davis. Unfortunately for you, this is not the kind people recover from easily. Then the gavel slammed down across the courtroom with deafening force. Case dismissed. We are adjourned. The audience instantly erupted into loud applause, while Karen remained frozen in her seat. For several seconds, unable to move as the reality settled over her like collapsing concrete. Robert James quietly gathered his documents, relief and exhaustion flooding across his face simultaneously. For the first time in months, he finally looked like someone who could breathe again. Court officers approached Karen carefully while she slowly stood from her chair, avoiding every camera pointed directly at her. But the humiliation didn't end inside that courtroom. Within hours of the episode airing publicly, clips exploded across social media platforms everywhere. Millions of viewers watched Judge Judy sit completely motionless while Karen desperately performed her fake panic attack with a brown paper bag in her hands. Memes flooded the internet overnight. Reaction videos gained millions of views. Hashtags connected to fake courtroom manipulation trended across platforms globally. The moment paramedics announced Karen's perfectly normal vital signs became one of the most replayed television courtroom scenes in history. By the end of the week, the hearing had accumulated more than 50 million online views, transforming Karen Davis from a self-proclaimed victim into a national symbol of manipulation, dishonesty, and fake victimhood. And while Karen disappeared from public attention afterward, one thing remained permanently unforgettable for everyone who watched that courtroom battle unfold. The terrifying moment she realized Judge Judy had seen through her act from the very beginning.